accidentally binged a series in August. Hi friends, welcome back to another video. I'm Tati, and today I'm going to be talking about the series that I accidentally binged in the month of August. So, how does it go? In the month of August, I read The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This was a birthday gift from Skylar. This is her favorite book, and one of her favorite books, and she really wanted me to read it, knowing that there was a very likely chance that I would not like it. And so I started reading it with my own two eyes, and decided to get the audiobook from the library because could not do it. And I listened to the audiobook. And then I ended up listening to the audiobook for The Wicked King and Queen of Nothing. Why did I do this? I have no idea. Is it that I can't leave a series uncompleted? I don't know. Is it that there was one character that I cared about, even though I cared about nobody else, or the plot for that matter? Possibly. Anyway, this is all my way of saying I binged this series in August, and we're gonna talk about it right now. I'm gonna talk about this book, The Cruel Prince specifically, in detail in my birthday vlog, but I'm also gonna talk about it here because I have thoughts. Okay, so let's start with ratings. Cruel Prince, 3 out of 5. Wicked King, 3 out of 5. Queen of Nothing, 3 out of 5. Yes, this entire series is a very solid 3 out of 5. Okay, let's start with The Cruel Prince. Like I said, this was Skylar's birthday book to me. I read it, and I was pretty bored throughout most of it. Yeah, I just wasn't interested in the characters or what was going on. Jude was an okay narrator, but I found her very complaining and very like antagonistic and making her own life really difficult when there are ways that she could have made her easier. But, you know, I understand that she's living in a world that is like designed to kill her or something like that, so, you know, there's that. She is quite smart in some aspects, but, you know, other than being quite smart and knowing how to use a knife really well, she didn't give me much. I don't know, I didn't really like her as a character or as a protagonist, and so yeah, I found her complaining. She complains a lot about the fact that she like lives in fairy but isn't a fairy, so she's like constantly in peril, which like definitely something to complain about, but not something to base the entire book around. And even when she gets a little bit of power when she becomes a spy for Prince Dane, she's still very, like, she's achieved power, she's had a gesh placed on her, so she can no longer be manipulated. I don't remember how it is that it's called. Basically, she can't be compelled anymore. And yet she still finds things to complain about, which I wasn't the biggest fan of. Towards the end of the book, she believes herself to be a kingmaker, but other than being decently intelligent and her ability to wield a sword or a knife, I didn't really see it. It seems like she was more reacting than anything. She wasn't like creating plans or contingencies or whatever. It was just like her constantly reacting to whatever was going on. I didn't really care for Cardin all that much in this book. By the title of the book, you would think that he would be a bigger part of it, but he's not. The book is mostly about Jude, and he's not all that much in it. I would have thought that he would have had a bigger presence and influence in the book than he does actually have. And I also didn't quite jive with the fact that in the third act, Holly Black tries to redeem Cardin, but she doesn't do all that good of a job at it. Yeah, she tries to redeem Cardin by making it seem like all his cruelty towards Jude was him actually like being in love with Jude and like caring for her and trying to protect her in his own like strange twisted way. which as a fan of enemies to lovers, I'm usually pretty lax on, but in this book it just didn't track for me. It didn't feel sincere. It kind of felt like a mockery of what should have been. I don't know, it did not track for me. It just didn't track. Most of the characters in this book are pretty forgettable. The plot twist of Oak being part of the royal bloodline was also super out of left field, and it was just like a more like, okay, shit, whatever, it happened, than it being like something big that I should have cared about. I didn't really have all that strong reaction to it. What I did have a reaction to was the twist of Locke actually being with Taryn instead of Jude, and using Jude to test her sister's love for him, which is super fucking twisted, and him and Taryn can both go fuck themselves. Like, and that stands for like the entire series. Yeah, they can just go fuck right off. As for the Wicked King, Jude, I found her to be less complaining this time around. She's definitely honing her skills as an assassin, as a politician, and she's playing the political game, but she's not playing it well. She spends most of her time and energy trying to keep her hold on Carton, which, like, fine, do that, but really what she should have been doing is trying to gain influence and power in other areas and gain it on her own, so that if she ever lost control of Carton, which she was going to eventually anyway, she would have been in a much more powerful position to continue to be a major game player, rather than just like getting like tossed to the side. So had she, like I said, been more of a planner than a reactor, I think she would have like been in a much more powerful position. Also, her own fear of losing power is what eventually leads to her losing power. Her wanting to assert her own dominance over the fairy and like wanting to gain power, and her fear, and mostly her fear of losing it, is what eventually drives her to lose it and become exiled in the first place. I was really happy with Carton's growth in this book. He was slightly more in it than he was in the first one. I don't love the reluctant ruler trope, like don't force people into ruling that don't want to rule. That's not my cup of tea, but he really comes into his own in this book. He is I think he's starting to even like it a little bit, being the High King, especially in the later scenes when he's like able to assert more control and like more wiggle room in the orders that Jude is giving. And he really like comes into his own as a king. And so he's really a soft boy, but I much more enjoyed his character this time than I did in the first book, and he was more in it, which was nice. This book, I definitely did not enjoy the time that Jude spent in the Undersea. I found it boring. Here's the thing. So one of my main gripes with this series is that there is not enough Carton in it. The titles of the first two books allude to the fact that the series is supposed to be about him, because he's the Cruel Prince, he's the Wicked King, but he's barely in the series. Like, it's not justifiable for the series to be named after him if he's so barely in it. So I found the Undersea part, in which like Jude was trapped in the Undersea, incredibly boring, and I think it would have been much more of a successful book if instead of like following Jude to the Undersea, the reader would have stayed in Fairy with Carton. I think it would have been so interesting to see Carton like playing the political game, actually being a king now that Jude isn't there to like restrain him. Like, what did he do to get her back? Like, who did he trample over? What political scheming did he have to get up to? Like, that's the things that I want to see. I want to see more Carton. I don't want to see Jude in a cell for like 3 chapters. I don't know, it's just like, I felt like there was a much more successful way of doing this, and this just wasn't it. Moreover, in this book we learn more about Carton for sure, and I think that Carton, all he's really ever wanted in life is someone to love him and to respect him and to want to be around him. And so I think that if Jude had just like stopped for a minute and like stopped fighting her own stubbornness about her feelings for Carton, and if she would have just seen that, they could have had a much more like fruitful, beneficial relationship in whatever capacity, being as him as High King and her as, oh, what was her sentinel? I can't remember what the name for her post was called. His advisor. I think that if they just like, if she'd figured that out sooner, they could have had a much more fruitful, beneficial relationship. They could have been a total power couple way earlier, and it would have been great, and she never would have gotten exiled, probably. The only other thing I have to say is that Locke and Taryn continue to be the worst, and they can continue to go fuck right off. Queen of Nothing. This one is the one that I enjoyed the most out of all three of them. And I was actually quite intrigued about what was gonna happen, what was going on, and how Jude was making her way in the mortal world. Taryn continues to suck because she put her sister in so much danger by asking her to go to the High King and like lie to him. You know, Jude was exiled at the time, and Taryn continues to be the worst. Like, Taryn is continually the worst. She is never not the worst. This book was more twisty and turny, and it kept my attention for longer, which was good. In this book, we actually get to see Cardan like be the High King and put his training by the Court of Shadows into actual use, which is better than anything he's done throughout the entire three books. No, not kidding. I'm kidding. Cardan really does like have his moments in The Wicked King. And he was really smart about the riddle that he gave to Jude about her punishment and her exile. Anyway, this one, like I said, it kept my attention more. I like that Jude actually allowed herself to show some emotion and to finally admit that she does like Cardan and she is in love with her husband. And the scenes in which Jude takes power after Cardan is turned into a snake, they're A+. I think she did this was the Jude that we should have had all along, assertive, but also like knowing boundaries, being assertive and using the resources around her and actually asserting influence. This is what she should have been building up to, and she should have gotten there on her own, as opposed to being raised to that because she was Queen of Elfhame. So it should have just like, she should have tried to earn it rather than it being bestowed upon her through marriage. Once Jude delivers the killing blow to the snake and it turns back into Cardan, the moment of Jude giving out punishments, really fucking satisfying. Absolutely. Yeah. My biggest gripe with the series is that there should have been more Cardan. I think the series would have really thrived on a dual POV, so like Cardan and Jude, because especially in the first book, the author trying to redeem Cardan of his cruelty would have come across as much more sincere if I had been able to see it throughout, how he was doing all these cruel things, but also how he was internally feeling about it and why he was doing it. I would have loved to see more of his motivations and his family life, especially because in The Cruel Prince, we get a glimpse of that when Jude sneaks into Baelkin's estate and she sees Cardan getting punished by Baelkin. Basically, she sees him getting abused. And I think it would have been much more potent to the story and it would have been more impactful if the reader had been able to get some of those scenes and some of those explanations and some of that, like all that stuff from Cardan himself rather than like from Jude. I think it would have, like, the redemption arc that the author does at the end of the third act of Cruel Prince would have been much more believable, sincere, well made if we'd had glimpses of Cardan's POV throughout the story. And also, like I said, with Wicked King, I think it would have been much more successful had we been able to see what Cardan's own machinations throughout the book, and how he was like trying to fight against Jude's control of him. And in The Queen of Nothing, I also would have just liked to see more of him like being the king. I think a snake POV would have been really cool. That's something really cool that the author could have done that I think would have just brought even more depth to the book and the characters. So yeah, like I said, all the other characters are pretty forgettable because the only 3 that you really need to know about are Matic, which is Jude's adoptive father, Cardan, and Jude. That's really all you need to know. The other ones are all pretty forgettable, to the point that like Jude killed one of Cardan's friends in the first book, and I, honest to God, cannot remember his name. Like, couldn't if you asked me to. I remember Tyrion and Locke because they both suck. They like truly epically suck. And I think Nicasia was the other one of Cardan's friends, and she also sucked. But Tamlin and Locke really do suck above everybody else. Vivi, Heather, and Oak. Vivi and Oak are Jude's siblings, and Heather is Vivi's girlfriend. They're all pretty forgettable characters that are just there to like service the plot more than anything. They don't really do much throughout the entirety of the series. So yeah, it's just the side characters are very forgettable. The series was very middle of the road for me. I also don't think fairies are for me. I'm gonna read Court of Thorns and Roses with my friends, but I'm not expecting much of it. I really don't think fairies are for me, and after I finish a Court of Thorns and Roses trilogy, I might just call it quits on the fairies. But yeah, I think those are all my thoughts on the series. I accidentally binged it. It wasn't in my, like, I didn't plan for this to happen. It's just that I listened to the audiobook for The Cruel Prince, and I woke up a few days later and I kind of wanted to listen to The Wicked King, so I did it, and then I listened to Queen of Nothing like the next day. It's just, I don't know, something in me just wanted to listen to it. And so here we are a month later, and I binged the entire thing in about a week. So yeah, there's that. Yeah, I think I've said all I wanted to say. So thank you for joining me on this. I've been Tati. Like, share, subscribe if you want to. Come yell at me in the comments about how I just trashed your favorite series. It's fine. Skylar, I await your comments. Yeah, I think that's it for me. I'll see you on the next one. Okay, bye!